Yesterday, there was talk of a truce, but today the violence continues in the Middle East. The devastating five-day fight between Israel and Hamas in Gaza has already killed nearly 400 people. Joining us now, Dr. James Carafano from the Heritage Foundation to give us a better look at what's going on in the Middle East. Good morning to you, Dr. Carafano.
Well, thanks for having me. This really all started about 6 months ago, and there was a truce between Hamas, which is the political entity that runs Gaza, it's half of the Palestinian territory, and Israel. And it was widely seen as a defeat for Israel, that Hamas had been very aggressive, it had gotten concessions from the Israelis, it really put Hamas in a very positive situation. But the deal is that Hamas would stop, in a sense, harassing Israel by firing rockets and mortars from the Gaza Strip in Israel. That didn't stop, and in fact, it's accelerated. And that's what's prompted this Israeli response, which I think it far exceeded anything Hamas expected. And so what you've had here is almost a week-long bombing campaign where the Israelis have gone in. They started out by bombing basically the infrastructure of Hamas, anything where the military, the police were, and then they started going after the headquarters, anything that was used in planning. And now, quite frankly, they've just about run out of targets. So the real question is, it's easy to see how we got here, how this tit-for-tat back and forth between the two sides got us to this point. It's easy to see what the Israelis have done, which is significantly degraded Hamas's ability to control and be a military force. It's really not clear where we go from here.
That was my next question. There was talk of a ceasefire, as we said when we introduced you, but that did not happen. The reason being Israel is saying that they weren't sure that Hamas was going to honor that ceasefire. So what happens now?
Well, it doesn't really matter if it ends with a bang or a whimper, if there's a formal ceasefire, if the violence just tapers off. There's really kind of two roads here, or 2.5 roads. One is that this round of violence stops. That's actually, if it ended today, Israel would clearly come out the winner. It seemed that it had been strong, it was protecting itself, it significantly weakened Hamas. The competing political entity in Palestine, Fatah, would be elevated. It would be a defeat for the Iranians who supported Hamas. If they continue, there's not much else the Israelis can do. They can bomb the air forever. Hamas can't stop that. This is, for military analysts, this is the most frustrating kind of conflict because the two sides are playing to their strengths, right? Israel can bomb all day long. There's nothing Hamas can do. Hamas can lob rockets and mortars and even send suicide bombers or attempt to send suicide bombers into Israel. And there's nothing Israel can really do to stop that. So they can continue the violence forever, but it doesn't really get them anywhere. For Israel really to do something different, they'd have to move in on the ground, put boots on the ground, and actually occupy Gaza. That would be very protracted, urban warfare, bad camera, lots of civilian casualties. That would force, I think, the Middle East, which most countries in the Middle East have really stood on the sidelines, that would really force them to stand. New president coming in, he would be forced to take action.
I was going to say, what is the new administration's, what is that role, and what does an occupation in Gaza really mean?
Well, this is not a good situation for an incoming president. I mean, I'm sure they've all got crossed their fingers, and what they're hoping is, by whatever they're doing, by January 20th, it's all over. Because I think the last thing President Obama would want to do would have to go into this. You're a new president, you're coming in office. If you've got to be involved in foreign affairs, which of course they don't want to be, they want to focus on domestic issues. But if you've got to be in foreign affairs, the first time you do that and you step on the world stage, you want to be decisive and successful. And it's really hard to see what an American president could do walking into this situation to really make a positive difference.
And the sitting American president had hoped that his legacy would be to broker a peace deal there in these last days, and the escalated violence, it does not look like President Bush will have done that.
Well, you could actually say that this actually may help the cause of Mideast peace. Hamas is not good people. I mean, they are a corrupt organization. They are indiscriminately attacking Israelis. They're not a good partner for peace. They've been weakened now, so maybe others in the region will rise up and take the mantle of peace forward.
How much does that public perception, how far does that go? Because in the post yesterday, the big picture there, a 4-year-old girl is dead. Not good PR, though, for the state of Israel.
Well, I think clearly people that are watching this recognize that Israel has tried to make this a military operation. They've really tried to focus on military targets. Gaza is a city. I mean, you're going to have civilian casualties, but they haven't gone after civilians. So I think they've done the best they can. It would be totally different if it was a ground war. I mean, you couldn't avoid civilian casualties. You would have much, much worse press. And it would be prolonged and protracted, and it would really wear on the Israeli public opinion, I think.
The latest news out of that is my last question, is that Israeli troops, they have fired their weapons for the first time, but you said a very important thing to remember, though, they have not crossed into Gaza yet, though. So that's what we need to look, what do we need to look out for as this violence might escalate?
I mean, that's what we have to watch. In the next couple of days, violence will either temper down or the Israelis will cross over. If they cross over, that's a big problem. Firing itself, there are Hamas on the border. Hamas may have fired at them. They may have just returned fire. So that doesn't really mean very much. The Israelis mass troops, but that could be to kind of keep Hamas on edge so they don't really know what's next. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to go in. The Israelis have been kind of very equivocal on this. So I think what we need to do is just kind of watch the calendar in the next couple of days. For the best situation here is the violence winds down. Really, for the Americans, the best situation is it's over. So Obama doesn't have to act on something that's already happened, and he can focus on domestic issues.
Dr. James Carafano, thank you so much for being here from the Heritage Foundation.
Thanks for having me.